What would you do if someone quietly took away the seat you earned right in front of a full cabin, just because you didn't fit their picture of who belonged there? What if no one expected you to fight back, not with shouting or threats, but with something far more powerful, quiet dignity, and the force of legacy? On a seemingly ordinary flight to Seattle, a well-dressed black CEO was calmly removed from his business class seat to make way for a late-arriving white executive. No apology, no explanation, just the assumption that he'd quietly accept being moved to the back. But what happens when the person you underestimate is the very architect of the rules you thought you could bend? Who is Malcolm Everhart? And how did his silent stand shake an entire airline to its core? Was it really about a seat, or was it about the right to be seen, respected, and never made small again? Before we dive in, make sure to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this story, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss the next powerful story. Now, are you ready to board Flight 457? The overhead chime sounded like a polite alarm clock. Final boarding call for Cascade Air Flight 457 nonstop to Seattle, departing from Gate B12. Malcolm Everhart adjusted the strap on his leather shoulder bag. The terminal buzzed with the soft chaos of a late afternoon rush. But Malcolm didn't rush. He never did. He had learned long ago that power was rarely in a hurry. His steps were quiet but assured. Oxford shoes slightly worn at the edge. Crisp charcoal blazer, pale sage-green button-down, no tie, dark denim, a look that said ease, not effort. He handed his boarding pass to the gate agent. She glanced up, offered the routine smile. Her eyes paused briefly on his skin, then flicked to the screen. There was something there, not malice, just the pause, the kind that always came before a question that would not be asked aloud. "Enjoy your flight, Mr. Everhart," she said, her tone practiced. Malcolm nodded, not quite smiling, and moved past her toward the jet bridge. As he stepped into the aircraft, the scent of coffee and cabin-grade citrus disinfectant hit his senses. He inhaled quietly. "Welcome aboard, sir," said a young male flight attendant standing near the entryway. Tag read Devon. Malcolm nodded again and turned left toward business class. Seat 3A, window, good legroom, forward cabin, first row. He placed his bag in the overhead, careful, deliberate, then sat, spine straight, posture relaxed. He opened his phone, scanned a message, smiled faintly, and powered it down. Outside, the sun was beginning to dip. The light cut sharp angles through the cabin windows. Across the aisle, a woman in 3B was flipping through a paperback. 2 rows up, a couple whispered in low voices, speaking Spanish. Everything was calm, until it wasn't. A movement from the galley, a whisper. Devon, the younger attendant, turned his head slightly. His eyes flicked toward Malcolm's row. A woman in a sleek black blazer emerged behind him. Her stride was clipped, her face composed but unreadable. Her name tag, Tina Calloway. She held a digital clipboard in one hand. Posture tall, smile tight like a string pulled too hard. Devon followed her, a step behind, uncertain. As they neared, Malcolm remained still. "Is it him?" Tina whispered low to Devon. Not low enough. Devon nodded reluctantly. "Yes, that's 3A. Tina sighed as if inconvenienced by a technicality. Then she stepped forward. "Excuse me, sir," she said, voice polished, professional, but with the kind of practiced firmness that didn't leave room for objection. "I'm going to need to verify your seat assignment." Malcolm looked up. calm eyes, not surprised, not alarmed, simply measured. "I believe I'm in the correct seat," he said quietly. "3A. "Yes, of course," Tina replied, a smile still holding. "There's just been a small adjustment. I'll explain in just a moment." He reached into the inside pocket of his blazer and retrieved the boarding pass. Printed, clean, name, seat number, barcode. Tina took it, barely glanced at the details. "Yes," she said quickly. "It appears there was a duplication. We've reassigned this seat to one of our priority global passengers. We'll still be getting you to Seattle. Of course, just in a slightly different seat." Malcolm's eyebrow lifted, not aggressively, just enough to ask the question his mouth did not. "You'll be in 21C, aisle seat, just toward the back. We sincerely apologize for the inconvenience." Malcolm did not move. "Yet. I purchased this seat weeks ago," he said. "Still even, still polite. Yes, I understand, and we appreciate that. Unfortunately, there was a last-minute upgrade request for a global status traveler, and our system allows for strategic reassignment in certain cases." The man appeared then. Graham Whitmore, white, round in the middle, sharp blazer, over-gelled hair, and a gold watch so large it could track satellites. He stepped forward like someone who already knew the outcome. Tina turned toward him with renewed energy. "Mr. Whitmore, welcome back. Your seat is ready." Graham didn't look at Malcolm, or maybe he did. A flicker, a glance that barely touched the surface. Tina gestured toward the seat. Graham handed her his coat and lowered himself into 3A. Malcolm was still seated. Tina's smile thinned, her patience clipped. "Sir, I'm going to need you to gather your things. A beat. Just one." Malcolm's breath didn't change. His hands rested lightly on his knees. He turned slightly toward her. "Am I being removed from the seat I purchased? Because someone else holds a higher status?" Tina's voice faltered, just briefly. Then returned to script. "Our policies allow for strategic reassignment in exceptional situations. Thank you for understanding." 2 rows back, a voice spoke. Soft, southern, steel wrapped in velvet. "I saw that gentleman board early. He was here before half the cabin." They turned. A black woman in her 70s. Thick glasses, white curls pinned back under a paisley scarf, earrings like tiny brass bells. Her name would later be known as Miss Claudette. Tina didn't look at her. "We appreciate your concern, ma'am." Malcolm stood slowly, not in protest, not in defeat, just precise. He opened the overhead bin, removed his bag. His eyes met Miss Claudette's. She did not blink. Her voice carried no volume, only gravity. "Don't let them make you small, baby. That seat has your name on it." He gave her a nod. Not a thank you. Not yet. Just acknowledgement. 3 rows behind her, a young woman with box braids lifted her phone higher. Raya Benton, 26 film student, headed home for the holidays. She whispered to no one in particular. "No way I'm turning this off." The live stream title "Black Man with a Biz Class Ticket" just got moved for some white exec. This real life Malcolm walked down the aisle. No words, no sigh, just a long inhale. Row 21, seat C. He sat, still, and then he closed his eyes. He did not sleep. The cabin quieted again, but not in peace. It was the kind of silence that follows discomfort, the kind that settles between rows and hums just below the surface. One man had been moved. One man had taken his seat, but nobody knew what to say about it. Malcolm Everhart sat in 21C, upright, eyes closed but not asleep. His breathing was steady, even, the kind of stillness that made people think he was simply tired. But he wasn't tired. He was listening. 3 rows back, Raya Benton held her phone steady, her voice barely a whisper. He didn't argue. He just moved. The live chat rolled in below the video. Viewers were trickling in, slowly, then faster. Now what? Wait, is this Cascade Air? Why'd they move him? That ain't right. Miss Claudette shifted in her seat. Her knuckles rested gently on the armrest, rings glinting beneath the cabin lights. She glanced up the aisle toward Tina Calloway, who was now refilling glasses and avoiding every eye contact in the world. Devin Reyes stood near the galley, clearly uneasy. He kept glancing back toward row 21. His fingers tapped a silent rhythm against the beverage cart. Something didn't sit right. Not just because the man had been moved, but because of how quickly it had happened, how routine it all felt. In seat 3A, Graham Whitmore was settling in like a king returning to a throne. Shoes off, head leaned back, the man exhaled with satisfaction. He didn't notice the woman across from him putting her phone away. He didn't seem to notice anything at all. Tina approached with a warm towel. He didn't thank her. She didn't expect him to. At the back of the plane, the last of the passengers filed in. Gate closed, cabin sealed, or so it seemed. Malcolm opened his eyes slowly. A chime sounded, one of those soft system alerts, the kind only the flight crew hears. Tina glanced down at her handheld monitor, a minor update, but it wasn't the kind that comes from the gate. It was internal, labeled from someone higher, a note, a flag. Her brow furrowed. Malcolm's phone vibrated softly once in his blazer. He didn't move. He waited. Another breath, a glance at the seatbelt sign, still off. Then, calmly, he reached inside his coat. The screen lit gently. The message was simple. Ready if you are. No name, no signature, no emoji, just 4 words. Malcolm studied it. Not like a man surprised, like a man confirming the inevitable. Behind him, Raya was still recording. She leaned slightly into the aisle. Yo, I think he just got a message. Miss Claudette turned toward her. You still filming? Raya nodded, whispering, You bet. People need to see this. Claudette's voice was soft but certain. Then make sure they see it right. Devin wheeled the cart past them, paused. He looked down the row, saw Malcolm place his phone back in his pocket. Devin hesitated. It wasn't that the man looked angry or upset. It was that he didn't. That was what unsettled him. Up front. Tina stepped into the galley, smoothing her uniform. She sipped from a small bottle of water, eyes closed for a second longer than necessary. You all right? Devin asked gently. Tina didn't answer at first. Just tired, she said. Long day. Devin lowered his voice. That guy in 3A, you sure we had to move the other man for him? Tina's eyes snapped open. Devin, it's not personal. It's policy. Global priority trumps standard booking. You'll understand when you've done this job longer. Devin looked away. He had a ticket, though, a real one. Tina leaned against the counter. It's over. He didn't make a fuss, so let's not invent one. Back in 21C, Malcolm's hand moved again. This time, it was not his phone. It was a small notebook, leather cover, slim, tucked into the inner lining of his blazer. He opened it quietly, then he began to write. Not fast, not frantic, precise, 3 lines. Flight 457. Seat reassignment initiated without inquiry. Boarding pass confirmed at 3:32 p.m. He paused, then added a name, Calloway. No emotion passed across his face, but his hand moved again, a second page. Behavior observed denial of boarding validation. No cross-verification. Immediate relocation. Verbal phrasing. We appreciate your understanding. A third page began. The handwriting was small, neat, like someone writing for record, not for memory. Raya leaned in, her voice low to her audience. He's writing something. Notes or a letter, maybe. He hasn't touched his phone since that first buzz. In the chat, someone typed, "Dude's calm as a monk." That's either danger or power. Another said, "I know that man. I swear I've seen him in a Forbes article." Someone else replied, "Who is he?" No one answered yet, but the silence was growing heavy. Not loud, just dense. At the front, Tina smiled brightly at Graham. "Can I get you anything else, Mr. Whitmore? Another whiskey if you've got it." "Of course." Her voice was syrupy sweet. Graham didn't notice the hush beginning to spread. Didn't notice Devon watching Tina from behind the curtain. Didn't notice that 2 rows back, an elderly woman was watching him like a hawk. Miss Claudette folded her arms. "He's comfortable now," she whispered. Raya nodded. "Too comfortable." Claudette shook her head slowly. "Some people sit where they don't belong and never know it. Others get moved from where they do belong and make the whole world feel it." In 21C, Malcolm continued writing. Still no drama, still no sound, just pen against paper, quiet, controlled, unstoppable. Devon stepped closer again. This time, he bent toward Claudette. "I shouldn't say this," he whispered, "but something's coming. I don't know what, but it's not done." Claudette didn't flinch. It never is, baby. Not until the sky learns to listen. Back on her screen, Raya's stream passed 1,700 viewers, and growing. Malcolm Everhart kept writing, line after line. His pen moved with a rhythm that felt almost like breath. The page filled slowly, methodically. He did not glance up. He did not rush. From the outside, he looked calm, composed, but inside, the calculation had already begun. He was not angry. Anger was too cheap for this moment. This required clarity, just 2 rows away. Miss Claudette had not taken her eyes off him. She watched the way his jaw shifted ever so slightly, not clenched, not tight, just engaged, alert, listening, even now. Raya Benton adjusted her grip on her phone. The live stream was still going. More than 3,000 people now. She whispered to herself as the comments flew past. He's still writing, not saying a word, just writing. One of the top comments popped in. "Why is he in economy? He looks like he runs a boardroom." Another read, "I think that's Malcolm Everhart." No way. Raya blinked. Malcolm Everhart. The name echoed in her mind. She had heard it before, somewhere in an article, or maybe a podcast. Something about silent capital, disruptive ethics in tech. She tapped the comment and opened the user profile. It was locked, anonymous, at the same moment. Malcolm paused his pen, then slowly, without a sound, he reached back into his blazer. This time, he pulled out a different device. It was sleek, slim, no case, no stickers, no branding, a second phone. He held it low, thumb over the screen, unlocked it, one swipe, one call. He brought the phone to his ear. No one else on the plane noticed. Not yet, but Raya did. She leaned in. "He's calling someone," she whispered. There was no change in his expression, no flicker of concern. His lips moved subtly, barely visible unless you were looking, and she was. "Activate Clause 9.7, he said calmly. "Notify Dana. Quiet mode until instructed. Hold escalation unless delay exceeds 10. Then he ended the call. Raya's fingers trembled slightly. On her stream, the viewers erupted. Clause 9.7, what is that? This man just used a phrase like he's got a protocol. Is this CIA? No, y'all. That's corporate language. That's legal leverage. Miss Claudette leaned into the aisle, her voice low. You see how still he is. Raya nodded slowly. He didn't blink. Still water runs deep. Baby. He's not just flying. He's watching at the front of the plane. Tina Calloway stood with her hands folded, watching the galley curtain sway slightly with the air. Devon came up behind her. Something's not right, he said quietly. Tina didn't turn. I followed procedure. Global guest takes priority over standard. Devon exhaled. But that guy, I've seen him before. His name's not just anyone. Tina shook her head. This is not about names. It's about structure. Devon looked toward business class. Exactly. The overhead chime sounded again. Tina checked her monitor. It pinged once. Red. Supervisor note. Hold at gate. Do not close doors. Await ground instruction. She stared at the message. What is this? She muttered. Devon peeked over. Supervisor override. Tina locked the screen and tucked the device back into her blazer. Probably just a final scan correction, maybe a crew check-in. Devon didn't reply. He had learned to recognize when someone was deflecting. Malcolm was still writing. On his page, the following now appeared. Subject reallocation, due to status over substance. Clause reference 9.7. Anti-discrimination operational override. Executed via direct shareholder discretion, a small symbol appeared beside the text. One only he would recognize, back in Seattle, 2 time zones away. A woman named Dana Truitt stood in the elevator of Cascade Air headquarters. Her phone buzzed once. She looked down. Message read, Everhart has invoked 9.7. Prepare for visible enforcement. She didn't flinch. At 42, Dana had seen her share of institutional arrogance, but Clause 9.7 had never been called before. It was buried deep inside their strategic oversight contracts, a tool never meant for use until now. She turned to her assistant. Get the folder, the real one. Back on Flight 457, Raya's stream had crossed 6,000 viewers. People were stitching it, sharing it, screen recording. The comments turned faster now. Just looked him up. Dude's worth like 800 million. WT. He's a silent partner in multiple travel networks. Cascade Air is about to learn. Inside the plane. No one had said anything directly to Malcolm, but the air around him had changed. It always did when truth started waking up. Miss Claudette sat straighter. She could feel it in her bones, the quiet before a shift. She had lived through generations of being moved, being told to wait, to comply, to take the seat offered, not the one earned. But this man, he was different. He did not raise his voice. He carried something else, legacy. She leaned across the aisle, just enough to speak. Sir, she said softly, I don't mean to intrude, but I think they don't know who you are. Malcolm looked at her, just a glance, then a small, kind smile. I don't think they ever stop to think at all. He replied. Raya gasped. The comment thread exploded. He said that with a smile. This is the calmest drag I've ever seen. Y'all, he's not mad. He's methodical. Up front. Tina checked the time again. Flight still hadn't pushed back. She pressed the intercom button. Captain, we're still holding. Something to do with the manifest. The reply was brief. Don't close the cabin. Orders from upstairs. Tina frowned. What do you mean? Orders legal is watching. Tina paled. Legal. Devon turned toward her, eyes narrowing. What did you say? I said nothing. She replied quickly, but her voice cracked. The curtain fell silent behind them, and from row 21C, a man closed his notebook, his hands still, his posture straight. No turbulence had arrived, but the storm had already begun. Captain Julian Reese stood in the cockpit doorway, one hand resting on the frame, his brow drawn together. What's the delay? He asked. Tina Calloway looked up from her handheld monitor, eyes skimming the latest update from Central Operations. She hesitated. There was a seating adjustment. We had to relocate a business-class passenger. Reese narrowed his eyes. Did that take 20 minutes? Tina glanced at Devon Reyes, who had just returned from coach. No, sir, but there's some attention on the situation now. Reese tilted his head. Attention. Devon stepped forward. There's a live stream going around. One of the passengers started recording when we reseated a gentleman from business class to economy. The captain blinked. That's policy. Happens all the time. Devon replied carefully. Yes, sir, but this time it's going viral. Captain Reese paused. Who did we reseat? Tina's jaw tightened. A man named Malcolm Everhart. The name landed like a quiet thunderclap. Reese turned slowly back toward the cabin. That name sounds familiar. From row 21C. Malcolm sat quietly, eyes forward, hands resting on the closed notebook on his tray table. The second phone lay face down beside it. Rhea Benton, still recording, whispered into her mic. I think the captain just heard the name. In her chat window, messages exploded. Everhart, as in Everhart Group. He funds 3 airport modernization initiatives. Cascade Air messed up big time. Miss Claudette didn't even look up. He told y'all already. She murmured. They never stopped to think. Meanwhile, 2,000 miles away in Seattle, a team of 7 sat around a frosted glass table in the executive wing of Cascade Air headquarters. A large screen projected a paused image of the cabin, Malcolm, seated in 21C. A caption below the image read, Live Flight 457. Incident under observation. Chief Legal Officer Martina Hayes was mid-call. I understand. He initiated Clause 9.7. That's active oversight, which means governance has jurisdiction. She covered the mic. We need Dana on that flight now. One of the communications analysts said quietly, We're trending number 5 on social under Chihuahua wrong seat right man. Hayes didn't flinch. Get ahead of it. Do not issue a public statement. Not yet. Back on the plane. Rhea's view count ticked past 10,000. She whispered again. He hasn't moved, not a muscle. Her camera slowly panned to the front. Graham Whitmore lounged in 3A, sipping another glass of whiskey. He looked unaware, or maybe just unwilling to care. Tina stepped into the galley, her face paler than before. Devon followed. You saw the name? Right? He asked. Tina nodded once. Then, you know. Tina exhaled sharply. He should have said something. Devon blinked. You're saying it's his fault for staying calm? Tina snapped. I'm saying I followed the rules. He got a seat. He didn't complain. Now I'm being watched like I committed a crime. Devon didn't respond. Not at first. Then he said softly, "Maybe it's not about the seat. Maybe it's about the assumption." Tina looked away. A chime sounded again. Tina's handheld lit up. ETA confirmed. Oversight Enforcer Dana Truitt. Assigned Flight 457. Gate hold extended. She froze. Devon saw it. Tina read the line again. "Truitt. Dana Truitt." Devon exhaled. "You mean the compliance director, the one with executive jurisdiction?" Tina said nothing, but her hand trembled slightly as she tucked the monitor back into her blazer. Raya caught it on camera. "Y'all, something just happened. That attendant. She just got news. Her face says it all. In row 21C. Malcolm opened his second phone again. Another message had arrived. Dana's in the air. Legal team monitoring live. Hold position." He smiled faintly, then placed the phone back down. Graham stirred in 3A, finally noticing the unusual quiet around him. He looked back briefly, saw nothing of interest, then adjusted his seat again. Miss Claudette turned to Raya. "He still doesn't know." "Know what? That he took the wrong seat and picked the wrong man." Raya's stream buzzed again. A new DM, no profile picture, no name, just one message. His firm manages $9 billion in aviation partnerships, and he doesn't make scenes. He makes systems bend. Raya whispered, "Oh my God." The chat feed surged. "This just went corporate. Watch that crew get reassigned. Wait until the board sees this." At that moment, the curtain between galley and cockpit opened. Captain Reese stepped out again, his expression unreadable. He looked toward Tina. "We've been advised not to push back." Tina nodded. "I got the same." Reese's voice lowered. "They're saying someone from governance oversight is inbound," Devon replied. "She's already on the manifest." Reese blinked. "No one's ever activated 9.7, he said quietly. "That's nuclear," Tina whispered. "Then why's he so calm?" Miss Claudette answered from behind them, just loud enough to be heard. "Because, baby, he's not reacting. He's revealing." Devon turned toward her. She met his eyes with steady grace. "I've seen men like that. Been alive long enough to know the difference between a quiet man and a powerful one." Raya whispered, "Ma'am, what do we do? You just keep that camera steady. Child, let the world see it unfold." The light above flickered softly. The engines remained idle. The jet bridge still attached. Everyone was seated, but no one was going anywhere, because this flight had already taken off in a different way. It was no longer about seats. It was about reckoning. The aircraft was full, every seat occupied, cabin bags tucked away. The door was still open, but no one was boarding. Passengers shifted, glanced around. Someone yawned. A baby stirred in the back. No one said it aloud, but everyone felt it. Something was off. Flight 457 had not pushed back. No one had been told why. In 3A, Graham Whitmore checked his watch. He glanced out the window, then over at the flight attendant as she passed. "What's the holdup?" he asked. His voice curt. Tina Calloway didn't answer right away. Her lips pressed together. She handed him a fresh napkin. "Minor technical delay. Sir, just a final systems check." Graham grunted. "Hope it's fast. I've got a client dinner waiting." Tina walked away before he finished the sentence. Devon Reyes stood by the forward galley, watching the cockpit door. He had never seen a captain stay inside that long after passengers were boarded. Never seen a crew this still. He looked down the aisle toward 21C. Malcolm Everhart sat there, notebook closed, eyes steady on the tray table. His fingers rested on the second phone, but he didn't look at it. He didn't have to. Everything was already in motion. Rhea Benton was still recording. Her phone battery dipped below 40%, but she didn't dare stop streaming. "This is wild," she whispered. "We're all just waiting, like the plane forgot how to leave." She glanced at Miss Claudette, who had pulled a small crocheted scarf over her shoulders like a shield. "You ever seen anything like this?" Rhea asked. Claudette didn't answer right away. She was still staring forward. "This ain't a delay," she finally said. "This is judgment circling the runway." Rhea's comment section lit up. "Board's still open. Why haven't they closed the door? Cascade Air knows they messed up." Inside the cockpit, Captain Julian Reese stared at his tablet. A series of legal notifications sat open on his screen. One line blinked and read, "Do not depart. Await governance personnel. Compliance freeze in effect." He rubbed the bridge of his nose and leaned back in his chair. "This isn't about maintenance," he said to his co-pilot. "No, sir. This is about a passenger." "Yes, sir." Reese leaned forward again. Checked the manifest. Malcolm D. Everhart. That name again. He remembered it now. From a briefing 3 months earlier. A strategic partnership memo. A bullet point on a slide deck no one read closely. A silent investor. A major one. "God help us," Reese muttered. In the forward galley. Tina checked her handheld again. No updates, no lift on the freeze. She paced quietly, the hem of her uniform brushing past the metal storage cart. Devon approached her. "You okay?" he asked. She didn't look at him. "What do you think happens if this gets worse?" Devon tilted his head. "Depends how bad the higher-ups think it is already." Tina stared at her screen. "You think he's going to file a complaint?" Devon took a breath. "I don't think he needs to file anything." Tina blinked. "What's that supposed to mean?" Devon leaned in slightly. "I think he already owns the complaint desk." For a second, neither of them spoke. Behind them, a quiet ding sounded. Cabin systems pinged a connection. A secure channel had been engaged. Malcolm's phone vibrated once. He picked it up without urgency. Message read, "Dana has landed. Approach and gate. Flight hold confirmed. You are green for next step." Malcolm placed the phone face down again. A soft smile played at the corner of his mouth. It wasn't joy, it was confirmation. Miss Claudette adjusted in her seat, watching him. Rhea whispered again, "He's smiling. Y'all, I think he knows what's coming." In the chat window, a wave of comments rushed in. "It's about to happen. The better reseat him before Truitt walks on board. You do not play chess with the man who built the board." In Cascade Air's downtown Seattle headquarters, the Situation Room had gone from tense to near silent. All phones were on mute, all eyes on the screen. Live feed of the aircraft, a freeze frame of Malcolm in 21C, and the manifest. Legal Director Martina Hayes spoke quietly. Clause 9.7 was written for internal accountability, not enforcement. It's never been activated on an active flight. Her assistant replied, "It is now." Hayes nodded. "Which means we're not managing PR anymore. We're managing survival." Back on Flight 457, the cabin lights dimmed slightly. Tina stood frozen. Devon whispered, "You see that?" She nodded. "Lighting change means security channel just engaged," she said. Devon leaned closer. "This isn't going away." Tina looked down the aisle toward 21C. Malcolm had not moved. He looked out the window now, as if watching the clouds from a plane that hadn't left the ground. She watched him for a long moment, then said quietly, "I thought he was just another upgrade mismatch." Devon said nothing. Tina continued, "I thought he'd take the new seat, maybe send an email later. I didn't expect." Her voice faded. Devon finished the sentence for her. "You didn't expect consequence." The door at the front of the aircraft opened. A figure stepped in. Navy suit, gold-rimmed glasses, hair pinned back in a flawless bun, ID badge on the belt. She did not pause. She walked the aisle like she owned the air inside it. Miss Claudette whispered, "That's her. That's Judgment in heels." Raya turned her phone toward the front. "She's here." The chat feed exploded. "Dana Truitt just boarded. Cascade Air is done. Let the sky bear witness." In 21C, Malcolm looked up. He didn't stand. He didn't speak. He simply waited. Dana Truitt stopped beside his row. She nodded once. Malcolm returned the nod. The next move was hers. Dana Truitt did not waste a second. The click of her low heels was the only sound as she moved through the cabin. Row after row of eyes tracked her. Some passengers leaned out slightly. Others sat frozen. Phones lifted. Whispers rose. She said nothing. She did not need to. She stopped beside seat 21C and looked down. Malcolm Everhart looked up and met her gaze. He did not flinch. He did not rise. He simply nodded once, calm and assured. Dana returned the nod and waited. The silence between them was heavy but respectful, like two chess masters acknowledging the next move before a piece even shifted. Finally, Malcolm spoke. "I have documentation." Dana gestured gently. "At your discretion." He reached into his bag and pulled out the black leather folder. Clean, worn at the corners from use, not age. He laid it on his tray table and opened it. The contents were precise. Tabs labeled in bold, red dividers, a copy of the partnership agreement, a certified letter, a clause highlighted in blue, Clause 9.7. Dana took a step closer. She did not sit. She simply read. Passengers in nearby rows were silent now, watching with the kind of attention normally reserved for courtroom dramas or historic moments. They did not know what Clause 9.7 meant, but they understood gravity when they saw it. Raya's camera zoomed in, capturing everything her lens could reach. "This is real," she whispered. "He's not complaining. He's documenting," Miss Claudette murmured to herself. "And the system finally has to answer." Across the cabin, Tina Calloway stood motionless in the galley, her monitor clutched to her chest, her lips pressed into a line so tight they seemed to vanish. She was not sure what she feared more, now being reprimanded or being ignored. Devon Reyes stood behind her, arms crossed, watching Dana like she was holding fire in her hands. Dana looked up from the folder. "Mr. Everhart, do you wish to formally activate Clause 9.7 at this time?" Malcolm nodded once. "I do." Dana clicked her pen and signed the bottom of the compliance sheet. It was official. Oversight had entered the cabin. Dana turned to the forward galley. "Please inform the captain that operational control of this flight now falls under governance supervision pending internal investigation." Tina blinked. "You're grounding us." Dana's voice was calm. "Professional? No. The decision to proceed or not will be determined after compliance protocol has been followed. As of now, you are relieved of decision-making authority." Tina's monitor slipped slightly from her grip. Devin caught it without a word. Back in 21C. Malcolm returned the folder to his bag and closed it quietly. He looked forward. He did not celebrate. He simply breathed. In 3A. Graham Whitmore finally noticed the change in energy. He removed his earbuds, glanced around, and frowned. "What's going on?" he asked no one in particular. No one answered. He turned in his seat and saw Dana standing beside the man he had replaced. He squinted, then whispered under his breath, "Oh, hell." Raya's live stream passed 28,000 viewers. The chat feed became a storm of capital letters and flame emojis. "He just took control of the flight. Who is this man Cascadaire is over?" Raya whispered into her mic. He never raised his voice. Not once. Miss Claudette closed her eyes. She remembered lunch counters and church basements. She remembered letters passed in silence and hands held in waiting rooms. She remembered what it meant to be moved aside with a smile. And now, here it was again, but flipped, rewritten, by someone who did not shout, by someone who simply knew the rules better than those trying to bend them. At the front of the plane, Captain Julian Reese stepped out of the cockpit. Dana met him halfway. "Captain," she said evenly, "we are initiating a compliance lock. You will remain at the gate. The jet bridge will stay connected. No further movement is authorized." Reese looked stunned. "I don't understand. I thought—" Dana held up the folder. "Mr. Everhart is a Tier 1 strategic investor with binding equity rights. Under contractual policy, he has initiated an immediate oversight review. Clause 9.7 allows temporary operational transfer in events of observed discrimination or violation of equitable boarding policy." Reese nodded slowly. His voice was lower now. "So, he's not just a passenger." Dana glanced down the aisle. "No, he never was." Behind her, Tina tried to step forward, tried to speak, but she couldn't. Instead, she turned and walked slowly to the crew locker, opened it, and removed her blazer. Devin watched in silence. "You quitting?" he asked gently. "No," she said, folding the blazer over her arm, "but I think I need to be ready. In 21C. Malcolm's phone vibrated once more. He glanced down. Headquarters confirmed. Executive board now observing. Do not engage further. He turned the phone face down again and waited. Everything had shifted, not just in the air, but in the tone, in the eyes of those who had watched him be removed without cause. Now, they watched him reclaim without chaos. Raya whispered one last thought into her mic before ending the live stream. He didn't fight, he enforced. Malcolm Everhart stood, not quickly, not dramatically. He rose the way a man does when he knows every eye is on him and still refuses to perform. The black leather folder stayed tucked under his arm. His coat was smooth. His presence sharpened the silence like a blade passing through mist. The cabin didn't erupt. It inhaled. Every person who had watched him be escorted back to row 21 now watched him walk forward without a word. The air felt charged, like an orchestra just before the downbeat. He passed row 18, then 14, then 10. Some passengers turned their heads slightly, others stared straight ahead, pretending not to care. But everyone saw. Miss Claudette closed her eyes. Let it be known, she thought, that he walked without needing to raise a hand. Near the front. Devin Reyes watched the aisle. It was the longest walk he had ever seen someone make in silence. And yet it echoed. Row 3A was waiting. Still empty, still his. But beside it, Graham Whitmore was fidgeting. He had removed his earbuds and was now straightening his jacket for the third time in 5 minutes. His posture was less confident. His eyes darted toward the aisle, then away. Malcolm reached the row, paused, turned his head. Graham looked up. The two men locked eyes. Graham opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Listen." "I didn't." Malcolm said nothing. He didn't need to. His gaze didn't accuse, it confirmed. You knew what this was. Then Malcolm stepped into 3A, sat down, unbuttoned his blazer, set the folder on his lap, fastened his seatbelt. That was it. He didn't need applause. He had reclaimed space. Devon turned to Dana Truitt, who stood just behind the cockpit door. She nodded once toward the intercom. The captain's voice came over the cabin speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be closing the door shortly. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. Thank you for your patience." And then, for the first time in 40 minutes, the sound of the jet bridge pulling away rang through the fuselage. Raya Benton watched Malcolm settle back into his rightful seat and whispered. He sat down like it was a throne. She ended her stream. The final image captured Malcolm in profile, eyes forward, calm as still water. The caption under the clip read, "He didn't yell. He didn't beg. He just made gravity shift." In the galley, Tina Calloway stood still. The words "Crew Review Initiated" flashed across her monitor. She tried to swallow, but her mouth was dry. Devon didn't say anything to her. He didn't need to. The system had already spoken. And Malcolm. He didn't speak either, but his stillness was louder than thunder. Back at Cascade Air's headquarters, a conference room had filled quickly. The board's emergency session was already underway. Legal teams, brand officers, risk consultants, all watching the internal stream. The woman leading the session stood near the screen. She pointed at the paused frame showing Malcolm in 3A. This is not about a seat. This is about structure. This is what it looks like when a partner uses the very systems we created to hold us accountable. Someone on the video call spoke. Has he said anything publicly? Not a word. Then what's he doing? The woman answered without hesitation. He's documenting and letting our actions speak louder than any press release could. Inside the aircraft. Graham leaned away from Malcolm, uncertain whether to apologize or stay invisible. He chose the latter. Dana Truitt stepped into the galley where Captain Julian Reese stood. Arms crossed. He asked quietly, "Are we clear to fly?" She nodded. "Yes, but this flight will remain flagged. Full incident report will be reviewed within 24 hours. Compliance will contact all crew directly." Captain Reese rubbed his temple. He never raised his voice. Not once. Dana looked out toward the cabin. That's the thing about real leverage. It never shouts. It just moves things. Back in 3A. Malcolm opened his notebook again. He wrote one line at the top of a fresh page. Phase 2 begins post-landing. Internal restructuring required. He closed the book gently and folded his hands. The plane taxied onto the runway. A quiet calm returned to the cabin. But this time, it was different. Not peace, presence. Raya turned to Miss Claudette. "Did you see that?" The way he walked back like he owned the air, Claudette smiled faintly. He didn't walk back to claim the seat. He walked back to correct the record. And Graham, he's going to remember that silence for the rest of his life. The engines roared softly. The cabin tilted. Flight 457 finally lifted off the ground. But for some, It had already changed altitude long before the wheels left the tarmac. 27 minutes after takeoff, the cabin of Flight 457 was unnaturally quiet. Not tired quiet, not late evening, low-light quiet. It was the kind of stillness people feel when they know they've witnessed something that changed a room, but no one dares say it out loud. Malcolm Everhart sat in 3A, head resting lightly against the window. His eyes were not closed, though they looked far away. The clouds outside rolled gently past like witnesses to everything. He was not looking for peace, he was reading the system. Across the aisle in 3B, Graham Whitmore sat stiff, angled slightly away from Malcolm, trying not to fidget but unable to stop shifting in his seat every few minutes. His mouth opened once as if to speak, but nothing came. He had started to say, "Sorry," but the words stuck in his throat like gravel, because something about Malcolm's stillness made apologies feel too small, too late. In the galley, Tina Calloway was reviewing her notes, but the screen in her hand blurred behind the tightness in her chest. She had replayed the moment over and over in her mind the way she had spoken, the tone she had used, the certainty she had held without ever checking twice. He didn't raise his voice, she thought. Not once. Not when I took his seat. Not when I gave it to someone else. Not even when he walked past me with that folder in his hands. She opened the crew communication panel. A new message flashed. Notice Flight 457 flagged, incident pending, all crew under internal audit. Tina exhaled slowly. In the rear cabin, Devin Reyes quietly passed water down the aisle. His steps light, his gaze calm. But when he stopped near Miss Claudette, she looked up at him with eyes that had weathered decades. "You all right?" she asked gently. Devin nodded, just thinking. About what? He hesitated, then said, "About how easy it is to forget what we're actually doing up here." Miss Claudette tilted her head. "Which is," he smiled slightly, "carrying people, not just bodies. Stories, lives." She nodded, "And sometimes justice." 2 rows ahead, Raya Benton scrolled through the thousands of comments flooding her live stream recording. The video was still spreading, mirrored across TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, even LinkedIn. She looked at the screen again. Malcolm's face, unmoved, unreadable, captured mid-breath, and then a direct message arrived. No name, just text. He funded the equity audit board that wrote the clause you just watched him activate. She stared at it, her thumb hovering over the reply box. Her mind tried to grasp the weight of that sentence. Malcolm didn't just use the system. He helped build it. A new wave of understanding washed over her. This wasn't just a passenger taking back his seat. This was someone holding a mirror to the entire airline from the inside. Her throat tightened. She looked up toward the front again. There he was, composed, distant, untouchable. She whispered into her phone, "Y'all, I think I finally get it." He didn't sit down because he was angry. He sat down because it was time. Inside the cockpit, Captain Julian Reese remained quiet, scanning the instruments even though the plane was cruising smoothly. Every now and then, he glanced at the small side screen that showed the incident log. The words were there in red. Clause 9.7 active. He had never flown a flagged flight before, and he knew what that meant. Everything from this point forward would be examined. Every sentence spoken, every decision made, every timestamp. He wasn't afraid of Malcolm. He was afraid of how easily the system had failed in front of him and how effortlessly that man had made it visible. In the forward galley, Dana Truitt was on her encrypted line with legal counsel back at headquarters. "No further action is required in flight," she said calmly. "But Malcolm has full authority to submit the final report by landing. Crew is aware." The voice on the other end asked, "How's the mood?" Dana glanced back into the cabin. "Quiet, heavy, like before a storm." "Is he angry?" "No," Dana replied. "He's exact, near the front row." Graham finally broke. He turned, eyes low, voice soft. "Listen, I didn't know. I just got upgraded and Malcolm didn't look at him. He didn't respond." He flipped a page in his notebook, wrote down one word. "Entitlement." Graham's shoulders slumped. He leaned back and stared at the ceiling. Not because he had been scolded, but because he had been measured and found lacking, and Malcolm didn't need to say a single word to make that clear. Further back, Tina sat on the crew jump seat, eyes closed. In her hands was a folded piece of paper, the beginnings of a letter she hadn't finished writing, not to the airline, to herself. Something about forgetting why she started this work in the first place, about how one moment of assumption could erase years of service, and how it had taken the quiet grace of one man to make her finally see it. Devon passed by and looked at her. She opened her eyes. "He's not punishing us," she said softly. Devon nodded. "No, he's teaching us what it costs to assume." At that moment, Malcolm closed his notebook and placed it in his lap. He didn't look around, but every person near him felt it. The shift, the weight, the warning. Thunder had not come in roars. It had come in stillness, and it had rewritten everything. By the time Flight 457 crossed into Washington airspace, the sun had begun its descent, casting gold across the clouds. From the outside, the aircraft moved like any other, a speck across the sky. Inside, though, it felt like something much heavier was flying. Row 3A had never looked more important. Malcolm Everhart had not moved for the last hour. Not because he was tired, because there was nothing more to say. His eyes followed the clouds, his mind calculated, and in his lap sat the notebook now filled with names, timestamps, quotes, and decisions. This wasn't a complaint. This was a case file. Graham Whitmore didn't say another word. His body leaned toward the aisle like a man trying to make himself smaller. He hadn't looked Malcolm in the eyes since the moment he realized who he had displaced. Not just a man, a force. Near the rear of the cabin, Raya Benton received a second anonymous DM. Stock just dipped 1.3%. Press team scrambling. They can't spin this. She blinked. Another message followed. Board just called an emergency session. Legal confirms this incident meets threshold for strategic review. She turned to Miss Claudette. "Ma'am, they're not just embarrassed, they're bleeding." Claudette gave a slow nod. "That's what happens when you gamble on silence and lose." Raya raised her phone again, not for a live stream this time, but to record one more short video. The camera pointed toward 3A. She whispered, "He's not sitting in that seat. He's redefining it in the forward galley." Tina Calloway stood next to Devon Reyes, neither of them speaking. Dana Truitt was seated now in the jump seat closest to the cockpit, reviewing documents on her tablet. Tina finally broke the silence. "Do you think he'll request to remove us?" Devon didn't answer right away. She looked at him. "Well," Devon's voice was soft. "I think if he wanted to get you fired, he would have said something by now." Tina turned to face forward again, her jaw set. "I didn't mean to hurt him." "I believe you," Devon said. But impact matters more than intent. And right now, his impact is doing what none of us could. Tina folded her arms. And what's that? Making the system pause. In the cockpit, Captain Julian Reese received a private message through the secure line. Final confirmation. Flight 457 will be met at gate by legal rep. He turned to his co-pilot. We're not just landing this aircraft, we're landing a storm. Back in seat 3A. Malcolm's second phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen. Press hold-in, internal counsel on site, post-landing walkout authorized. He nodded once, then placed the phone back in his inner coat pocket. He opened the notebook and wrote trigger complete. Phase 2 in effect. Documentation preserved. It would be the last entry on that flight. He looked out the window again, breathing evenly. The clouds below parted. Seattle was waiting. At Cascade Air Headquarters, a monitor showed live approach footage of the plane. A whiteboard nearby listed 6 names, board members, compliance leads, 1 ethics advisor. At the center was a printed page taped up hastily, Incident 457 Real-Time Governance Review, Clause 9.7 in play. In the room, Martina Hayes paced. A junior staffer handed her a file. She skimmed the top sheet, then stopped. What is this? The assistant lowered their voice. It's an older article. Internal newsletter. 2018. Interview with Malcolm Everhart. He was one of the original advisors for the Equity Oversight Clause. Hayes stared at the print. He didn't just know the rules, he had helped write them. Another voice chimed in from the video call. Can we contain this? No, Hayes said. We're not containing it. We're going to answer for it. Back on the plane, the seatbelt sign dinged on. Malcolm fastened his belt calmly. Tina came over, eyes lowered. Mr. Everhart will be arriving at Gate A6 shortly. A member of our leadership team will meet the flight. He looked at her, not cruelly, just clearly. I expected that. Tina hesitated. I didn't know who you were, she said. You didn't ask, Malcolm replied, voice low. A pause, then he added, but that's not the part I'll remember. She blinked. Then what will you remember? He looked toward the aisle. That you assumed I didn't belong, and that you made your decision before the door even closed. Tina's face drained. She nodded once and stepped away. In the rear cabin, Raya looked over at Miss Claudette. He just spoke. Claudette smiled. He doesn't speak often, but when he does, it's history. The wheels touched the tarmac, smooth, final. The plane began to slow. Passengers sat still, waiting for the usual chime. But this time, they waited longer than normal, because this landing was not routine. This landing was a reckoning. Outside, on the jet bridge, 3 people in Navy suits stood waiting. One held a folder. One held a tablet. The third held the authority of consequence in her eyes. And inside row 3A, Malcolm Everhart sat poised, ready to meet them not as a victim, not as a passenger, but as the man who reminded them all that silence is not weakness, it is strategy, and sometimes it is the sound of a system cracking open. The seatbelt sign chimed off, but no one stood, not yet. Usually when a plane lands, passengers leap to their feet, stretch their limbs, reach for overhead bags in a dance of impatience. But on Flight 457, no one moved. They just waited. Every eye seemed to point forward, even when people pretended to look out the window. At the front of the plane, the door clicked open, the jet bridge connected, and then she stepped in. Dana Truitt remained calm as always, her navy suit unwrinkled despite hours of tension, her expression unreadable. But this time, she wasn't alone. Two individuals followed, one carrying a digital tablet, the other holding a branded folder bearing the Cascade Air seal and the internal governance stamp. Captain Julian Reese met them near the cockpit. His voice was low. "They're quiet back there." Dana nodded, because they know something just changed. She stepped back into the cabin, turned toward the seat 3A. "Mr. Everhart," she said, not loud, not soft, just clear. Malcolm Everhart stood without hesitation. He gathered his leather folder, buttoned his blazer, and turned to face the aisle. He didn't look around. He didn't smile. But when he walked forward, the silence followed him like a current. Graham Whitmore shifted in his seat, gaze glued to the carpet. Tina Calloway stepped aside instinctively. Malcolm passed her without a word. Devin Reyes watched him with something like reverence. When Malcolm reached the jet bridge, he paused and glanced over his shoulder, just once. His gaze touched every corner of that cabin without ever moving his lips. A warning, a lesson, a mirror. Then he stepped through the door. The three representatives followed behind him. The door closed. Inside the aircraft, the stillness lingered until Miss Claudette finally said, "You ever seen a man move like that?" Rhea Benton whispered, "No, ma'am. That wasn't a walk. That was a reckoning." In the terminal, a security escort stood by, not because Malcolm requested protection, but because the corporate response team wasn't taking chances. Social media was on fire. Screens at multiple terminals now had muted versions of the video looping behind travel headlines. Cascade Air had never trended for anything this fast or this dangerous. In a reserved conference room on the arrivals level, Malcolm took a seat at the head of a small oval table. Dana remained beside him. Across from them sat a man in a gray tie and branded blazer, Marcus Gentry, Director of Internal Compliance. He looked like a man who had not slept in a while. "Mr. Everhart," Marcus began, "we appreciate your cooperation during today's incident. Please know we're taking this matter seriously." Malcolm didn't respond. Dana spoke instead. Clause 9.7 has already been activated. What Mr. Everhart has done is not a complaint. It's a binding enforcement of our equity agreement. You're not in apology mode. You're in audit mode. Marcus swallowed hard. "Yes, understood." Malcolm finally leaned forward and placed his leather folder on the table. He opened it to the tab labeled Final. "There are 6 pages," he said calmly. "Each page includes timestamps, quotes, procedural failures, and specific individuals by role, not name. The decision about naming will be made after your internal review. But understand, if I find any obfuscation or media manipulation, I reserve the right to escalate to governance override." Marcus nodded. Dana added, "If override is triggered, Cascade Air will lose preferred partner status across multiple alliances. That affects roughly 16% of your business travel revenue." The room fell very still. Malcolm continued, "I'm not here to be compensated. I'm here to ensure you don't repeat this, with me or with anyone else." His voice was even, like someone reading a mission statement, not making a threat. Marcus looked down at the pages. "We will begin review immediately. Staff on board the flight will be reassigned pending investigation." Malcolm closed the folder again. "One more thing," he said. Marcus looked up. There will be no statement issued without my direct review, no language about unintentional offense or unexpected outcomes. You do not get to call this a misunderstanding. You call it what it was, a structural failure." Dana gave a small nod of approval. Marcus reached for a pen. "Yes, sir." Back on board the plane, Tina sat in the crew jump seat staring at the cabin door. The passengers had begun to disembark, slowly, unsure whether to look her in the eye as they left. Some glanced at her and quickly looked away. Devon remained standing, nodding gently as people filed past. Raya was the last to exit. She turned to Miss Claudette before she left. "I'm going to make a short film about this." Claudette smiled. "You already did, and half the country watched it live." Outside the aircraft, Raya stepped into the jet bridge. She didn't speak to the airline rep waiting for her. She walked straight to a quiet corner of the terminal and uploaded her final clip. It showed Malcolm walking through the gate with his leather folder. The caption read, "He didn't fight for his worth. He made the sky remember it." In a boardroom 15 floors above the terminal, 5 executives sat around a screen. They watched the video again. They watched the silence. They watched the consequences. And finally, one of them spoke. "This man didn't come for vengeance." "No," another replied. "He came to reset the standard." And below them, in the arrivals hall, Malcolm Everhart stepped into a black car with no logo, closed the door quietly, and rode into a night that now moved differently because of him. Sunset painted the Seattle skyline in gold and blue as Cascade Air's crisis team began their long night. The boardroom that usually echoed with optimism now felt cold, filled with the hum of nervous energy. The legal team had finished reading Malcolm Everhart's 6-page report. Copies lay spread across the conference table like evidence at a trial. Martina Hayes, the chief legal officer, broke the silence first. "We're not just exposed, we're transformed. This isn't just about a flight. It's about our entire operation." The risk consultant, hands trembling slightly, nodded. "The press is holding for a statement. Should we?" Martina shook her head. "Nothing goes out until Mr. Everhart sees it. Not a single word on her screen." The feed from social media was a waterfall. "Wrong seat, right man." Cascade Air, Clause 97, hundreds of thousands of posts, most of them carrying clips from Raya Benton's live stream. Her phone buzzed again. It was Dana Truitt, the oversight enforcer. "Board needs to approve a new compliance protocol." Malcolm requested direct input. Martina replied immediately. "Schedule a meeting tomorrow. Priority, across the city, in a quiet restaurant booth." Malcolm Everhart sat with his folder open one last time. The low light caught the page edges, making them glow like the corners of a lantern. His phone was quiet now, only the occasional ping of a notification from people he knew, other investors, board members, a few old friends. He didn't answer any of them. Instead, he looked up at the server who approached. "Would you like another coffee?" Sir Malcolm smiled. "Yes, please." His voice was gentle. It belonged in a room where nothing needed to be proved. When the coffee arrived, he took a sip, closed his eyes, and breathed deeply. He thought of the flight, the moment his seat was taken, the moment he chose not to shout, not to threaten, but to write, to act with precision. He thought of the years it took to become the man who didn't have to prove himself to anyone in the air or on the ground. His thoughts wandered back to his childhood. He remembered his grandmother telling him, "Sometimes silence is the most unbreakable shield. A soft vibration pulled him from reflection. A new email. Subject compliance overhaul proposal. Malcolm, attached is the draft of the new equity policy. Your language was included verbatim. We'd like you to join tomorrow's leadership session. Respectfully. Martina Hayes, Chief Legal Officer, Cascade Air. He read it twice. The words landed with the kind of weight only legacy brings. By morning, the airline had issued an official statement, every word approved by Malcolm. The message was clear, without apology fluff. We acknowledge a failure of our equity protocol on Flight 457. Cascade Air is implementing an immediate review of all crew practices, enforcing Clause 9.7 as a model for partner airlines. All staff involved in the incident have been reassigned pending investigation. A new equity oversight desk will be established in every major hub, effective immediately. The statement went viral within the hour. Employees from other airlines retweeted it with comments ranging from praise to warning. Travel writers dissected every line. In a staff break room at the airport, Tina Calloway watched the statement scroll across the TV. Her hand shook as she sipped coffee. Devin Reyes sat across from her. His own thoughts clouded. He really did it. Devin said quietly. Tina nodded, eyes brimming. I never thought something like this would actually change the rules. He didn't want to punish us. He wanted to make it impossible for this to happen again. Devin replied. She looked at him. Do you think people will forget? Devin shook his head. Not this time. A supervisor entered, reading from a clipboard. Everyone assigned to Flight 457 is on review. Human Resources will schedule one-on-ones. Equity compliance training is now required for all crew. The room fell silent. Miss Claudette, already home, watched the announcement on her living room TV. Her granddaughter sat beside her, eyes wide as the reporter described Malcolm's role in reshaping industry policy. Grandma. Did you see him do it? The little girl asked. Claudette smiled softly. I saw him make history without raising his voice. I saw him make the world listen. At a film school across town, Raya Benton loaded her final video edit. It would become a short documentary streaming to millions by nightfall. Her narration played over the closing clip. He never gave a press conference. He never shouted. He made his silence impossible to ignore, and by refusing to be small, he left room for the rest of us to grow. Back in the restaurant, Malcolm paid his bill and stood. As he stepped outside, a young black man in a crisp suit approached him. Excuse me, the man said. I just wanted to say thank you. What you did. Malcolm shook his head with a gentle smile. Thank you, but remember, it's not about making noise. It's about moving with purpose. Sometimes that's all it takes. He left the man standing in the glow of the street lamp, a little taller than before. The next day, Cascade Air Board members logged into their leadership session. Malcolm appeared on their screen, calm and ready. He spoke not just for himself but for everyone who ever boarded a plane with a silent hope of being seen. He spoke with authority, and the system listened. The week after Flight 457, everything changed. The incident became a case study in corporate boardrooms, a trending hashtag for weeks, and a quiet legend among travelers and airline crews. More importantly, it became a seed planted in the minds of thousands of people who had never considered what dignity looks like when it moves without noise. Cascade Air's new equity policies swept through the company with speed. Every major terminal displayed signs that read, "Equity is not a privilege. It is a promise." At every gate, an equity oversight desk staffed by new faces, often people who looked like those who had once been ignored, became a fixture. Every crew member attended trainings built from Malcolm Everhart's own language, now part of the airline's manual. But legacy is not just a headline. It is a child at home in Oakland, watching her grandmother nod along to the news. It is a student in Chicago who remembers to look a passenger in the eye before making assumptions. It is a manager in Atlanta who hesitates before clicking reassigned seat, wondering who might be sitting in front of him. Malcolm Everhart never issued a personal statement. No press tour, no victory lap. He returned to his routines, long runs by the lake, meetings in quiet coffee shops, dinners with friends, and evenings reading in silence. Yet the world noticed. One day, a letter arrived at his home. No return address. Inside was a hand-drawn thank you card from a child. It read, "Thank you for being so calm and smart. My grandma said you showed them how to listen." He smiled. That was legacy. Not a storm, but a shift. A month later, a panel of airline CEOs gathered in New York. On the agenda, how to prevent another flight 457. At the table sat policy writers, investors, diversity advocates, and, quietly, Malcolm. He listened as others debated language and accountability. When asked for his thoughts, he answered simply, "You cannot teach dignity, but you can require it. Write your policies so that silence cannot hide injustice." The words lingered long after the meeting ended. Across the industry, a new clause appeared in strategic partnership contracts modeled on Clause 9.7. It became the gold standard, copied across continents. Even the most skeptical gate agents learned to look at each passenger's ticket and face, not just their skin or suit or accent, but perhaps the greatest change was in the way people carried themselves. Flight crews started to ask themselves new questions. Who is this person? What story do they bring with them? What do I owe to them? In respect and fairness, regardless of how busy or stressed I am. Raya Benton's short film became a national finalist, streamed in college classrooms and community centers. She received hundreds of messages, some angry, some grateful, most simply relieved that someone had finally caught on camera what so many had only whispered about. Miss Claudette's granddaughter started a blog called First Class Dignity. She wrote stories not just of injustice, but of small victories gate agents pausing, managers correcting mistakes, travelers standing their ground. At Cascade Air, Tina Calloway finished her review period and returned to work. She approached every passenger with a new softness, a humility that came from learning the hard way. Devin Reyes became a trainer for new crew, teaching from the heart, always ending each session with the reminder, justice is a habit, not a headline. Malcolm rarely spoke about the incident. When a young reporter finally caught up with him at a coffee shop, he agreed to answer just one question. If you could say anything to people who are told to be quiet or to move, what would it be? He paused for a long moment. Then he said, "You don't have to shout to change a room. Sometimes you just have to refuse to shrink." The answer rippled across social media. It was shared on bulletin boards in break rooms and pinned inside flight attendant handbooks. In a quiet corner of Seattle, Malcolm sat in his favorite cafe, notebook open. A young woman stopped at his table, nervous. "Excuse me, sir, are you Mr. Everhart?" My father was on your flight. He said you made the plane feel different." Malcolm smiled gently. "Sometimes," he said, "we remind the world what it forgot about us." She nodded, holding back tears. "Thank you." He closed his notebook, stood, and nodded once more before leaving the cafe, his presence as steady as ever. Woens. In the years to come, travelers still whispered about the man who turned silence into a tool, who made the sky itself bend toward justice. Every time a gate agent paused, every time a crew member checked a name before making an assumption, every time someone took a deep breath and stood their ground. Malcolm's legacy moved quietly through the world. He didn't demand to be seen. He simply refused to be unseen, and somewhere, on another flight, a little black girl looked out the window as the clouds passed and wondered, just for a moment, if the sky had always belonged to her too. That was the real legacy. Not a single seat, not a single policy, but the simple, unshakable truth that dignity is never negotiable. And so, as Flight 457 became legend, and silence became its own kind of thunder, the world moved forward one careful, dignified step at a time. As the engines quiet and the story lands, we're left with more than just outrage or applause. We're left with the image of Malcolm Everhart, a man who reclaimed his dignity not with anger, but with steady, unshakable presence. His silence echoed louder than 1,000 shouts, forcing a powerful industry to look itself in the mirror. How many times have we seen someone pushed aside, told to shrink, asked to wait their turn for no reason but the color of their skin, their accent, their difference? How many times have we let that moment pass, thinking it was just another day, another policy, another oversight? But tonight, let's remember every act of quiet strength has the power to rewrite the rules. Every moment of empathy can turn a seat into a statement. And every voice, even one unspoken, can change what the world expects from all of us. If this story moved you, let it move others. Like, share, and subscribe so you never miss the next story that reminds us of our shared dignity and challenges us to stand up to injustice together. We'll see you on the next flight.